Welcome Home Radio Podcast. Are you looking to buy or sell your home? Our team is here with answers to guide you through the buying and selling process. We encourage you to ask questions. Please comment on this show or visit us at welcomehomeradio.net for more information. Bringing real estate, lending, and education together in one place, and to help you make the right home decision for you and your family.
And welcome to Welcome Home Radio. It is July 31st, and where we bring, I can't get it right. It's not there. It is July 31st, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. We're going to be talking about hard money lending in the real estate market. And it is a type of loan that is still secured by real property, but it's normally a last resort or short-term bridge loans to use for primary property. And our expert today, Thom, is going to be able to tell us all about hard money, what it is it a good loan? Is it a good use of it? Or what is it? And Jeff's going to be able to tell us, hey, can we secure it? Can we titleize it? Can we make sure that's insured? So guys, welcome aboard. Glad to have y'all today. Hope you're doing well.
Good morning.
So Jeff is going to titleize things?
Titleize it. Don't you know that? That's a new word.
I like it.
I had not heard that before.
You ought to make that a part of your class, Thom. Do you need me to come there and instruct you?
I tell them that we're learning a new language when we talk about real estate. But,
which is very true.
But titleize. Let me
titleize it
for just a little bit. Well, this is a great topic, I think, as far as people out there that are thinking about investing, that are at the juncture where it's time to do something. They watched enough of the HGTV and all those people walking away with $1 million every time they sell a house. And
that's not how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works. Believe
okay.
me. Yeah, I only had to do 5 and I retired. But hard money is one of these kind of enigmas that folks get into and then realize there's probably a better way to do this. And it's not to beat up on hard money lenders. Hard money lenders have their place in the marketplace. But one of the things that a hard money lender requires is that you're buying a property pretty much on the cheap, and that you'll be able to then do the work necessary to get it to what they call an after repaired value. So what happens is when you go out and you, as an investor, you're looking at properties, you've got to look at not only what it costs to buy the property, but what does it cost to fix the property, and thusly what will be my follow-up profit margin from doing all this work. So the profit margin that you do with this work for most folks needs to be in about the 40% range because of the cost of the money. Hard money is a reference to, they're not going to be looking at your credit. They're not going to be looking at your ability to repay the loan. I've seen people with 580 credit scores I've seen people with 580 credit scores get hard money loans. The reality is that the investor is basing everything on the collateral, on the property itself. And because they're looking at everything from the property itself, go ahead.
They don't look at your ability to flip that property properly. And you're talking about, there's the value or the collateral, and they're looking at pre and post. But also, there's got to be a delivery mechanism. Aren't you that effective delivery mechanism? I know credit doesn't come into play. I know they're not looking at, some personal debt to income ratio type things, but they are looking at your ability to deliver that property in a sellable format to return, right?
Well, they're going to lend based on the property, yes, and they will look at you from the perspective of your investment in the property as well. In other words, and this is where I usually pull out my whiteboard, but I don't have my whiteboard tacked up to us. if I'm going to buy a property and the after, I know, whoosh, but I've got my marker here. I'll just write on the screen for everybody.
Now you're gonna have to write backwards, right? Correct?
I'm going to have to write. I know you have to write backwards. That makes it even that much more complex. But if I've got a property and you do all the work, the investor usually goes to the neighborhood before they give you the money. Most of them, if they're not familiar exactly, specifically with the neighborhood, in other words, you did a hard money loan with them about 3 months ago, you got it done, you flipped the house, you paid them off, they probably won't go to that neighborhood again. But if it's a brand new neighborhood, hard money lenders, and we're talking about usually somebody that's been doing this for a long time, they go to the house where it's going to be, the work's going to be done, and they assess, is this pie in the sky, or is this something that's realistically supported by the neighborhood? So in essence, Blair, the due diligence, what you're asking about is, we're used to ability to repay rules in our world. Ability to repay looks at that DTI, that it looks deeper, it looks at credit, so on and so forth. With the investors seeing, is this realistic to expect this house to sell for 200 once they buy it for 70 and they put 80 into it? Because they're going to be on the hook for some of that equity that's involved with putting that money down. Now, what happens is...
Say that one more time. They're going to be involved with some equity.
They're going to be involved with some equity because that's where their profit comes. For them to be paid, they need to see...
They don't want to lose money, Jeff.
They want to see that gap. That's why I wanted to ask you to repeat.
They want to see the gap, and that's where it comes the investor. That's where they come up with the additional cash to show and put into the deal from the very start, because they don't want to do these types of loans. They're not going to give them the whole 150 that they need to fix that house up. They're going to want to give them about 130, and the investor has to put in 20 of their own money. That's the big carry-all there, that the investor in this case that's buying the property is dealing with another investor that's utilizing the money part. So you've really got two competing interests to make money on the property, making it a hard money loan, which is what we call it, of course. Now, the drawbacks, of course, of this arrangement is the financing is extremely expensive. And that's part of what's being paid for up front, but it's also part of the profit built into the getting the money back in the end.
So this is certainly a method of... Go ahead.
How much are we talking interest rise?
Very good question.
Primary.
Right now, the interest rates have risen on these as they have in the regular marketplace. I was quoted the other day by a hard money lender that they would do something at 13.5%. So
these are considered very short term, is the concept.
These are very short term. They intend to get their money back in 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months. And the longer you run a course at 13% or 12%, back when the rates were down at 2% and 4%, they were charging 9%. So their rates have fluctuated upwards like just the regular 30-year fixed rate on an FHA deal. And as a result of that, in addition to that interest rate, typically closing the transaction will cost somewhere between 2 and 4 points, depending on your past histories with the short-term money lenders. And 2 to 4 points, well, on a $150,000 loan, 4 points is what? Do that math for me real quick, Blair.
$6,000.
There you go, $6,000, and that's part of that profit that's being assessed. Can this property make enough profit to pay both parties in the deal? And hard money lenders also, because it is really looked at as a commercial loan. That's another thing to have a consideration of. I've had people say, well, I'll just move into the house and start making the payments at 14%. No, you won't. Your deed of trust, when it's drawn up and the title company closes these things, your deed of trust says you cannot own or occupy the property. That's a condition against the deed, that you cannot you can't go in the property, live in it, work on it while you're living in it. They don't want owner occupants, because that would throw it into that ability to repay category versus being a commercial venture loan instead. So that's really kind of the ultimate difference, is that you're talking about, this is commercial lending. This isn't really the standard lending that you would get if you're going to live in the property or rent out the property or have a second home as a property. To take that hard money lender out, you're going to have to go and refinance the property. Well, if you haven't done all the work, and this is one of the things I saw, a friend of mine's looking at a house down in Granbury, and she sent me the listing. I looked at it. I said, man, you're going to live in a house where the drywall's up, but there's no painting on it. You're going to live in a house where it looks like they partially have cleaned the wood floors, but they haven't redone the wood floors. You're going to live in a house with wires hanging down from the ceiling. And she said, well, I've got a contractor that will do all this. And I said, well, there's no way you'll find any lender out there with any sanity that would loan you the money on this. Even a hard money lender would be hard pressed, because now, are you paying too much for the property because the investor that bought it only was able to go so far with the money they had available? All this is risk-based, my friend.
So, well, is hard money lending really a last resort then? Or is it a selective solution that's a short-term bridge loan to help people do flips?
I have investors that use it frequently, and there's several large entities in just DFW, and they're busy. But I think the investors that I'm closing, they look at the house. I know, Tom, you mentioned earlier of if it may take you 6 months to a year if you're doing some big rehab. If they're coming in and they know it's a quick, more of cosmetic stuff they're doing, they're using hard money because they're in and out. And they obviously, again, they know their margins are there.
And kind of give us an example of what that looks like, Jeff, if you've had that experience with is this institutional investors, or is this individual investors?
Two of them that I've worked with are individuals, and one, like you're familiar, is like Wildcat Lending. They're a pretty big entity now. So that's not an institutional lender per se, but they're just large enough that they can handle the scale of of being able to work with so many investors at one time.
Well, and I was also kind of driving the bus towards what kind of investor is this? Are these all contract investors? Are they all, like I said, institutional? Are they individual?
I'm sorry, contractors. Yeah, they're contract investors.
Okay.
Yeah, not the institutional, because they have their money typically. They're not using the hard money as much on the institutional.
So take us through on paper what you saw as far as the transaction. I'd like to hear what you saw physically that you did in the deal.
Well, in this case, they borrowed $250, and I mean, you're trying to make me think now. It's still early in the morning. They borrowed $250.
I know.
Their points are still
I'm
there,
so sorry. I should have had you write this down ahead of time. I apologize. My bad. But
in this case, they were only putting about $50 into the home, and like I said, most of that was cosmetics. So they knew. He told me, the investor said, we're out of there in 60 to 90 days.
Right.
And he said we're pushing more like 60. And then with their funds from as far as hard money, they've used this individual so many times, they're not hitting them on the early payoffs, which hard money doesn't, like when you use a typical credit purchase. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah. So that's where they gauge if they're going to go and which hard money lender they're going to work with, because any of these individuals or even groups, if they're doing many, they're going to have more than one hard money lender they can go to, as far as the ones I've worked with.
Geographically, do hard money, like you said, Tom, they'll go into a subdivision, but they'll only go once? Why is that? What's the reasoning behind not staying with an area if it's successful?
Well, I was making reference. I may have said that incorrectly. They go in the first time the investor is going to go and do, and we're talking about two investors. Let's make this the person buying the property, the entity buying the property. If this is a first time that the lender is loaning hard money in that area, they're going to go to the area to go see physically, is the area in decline? Is the area being remodeled? Are there other homes that are being fixed up? They want to get a feel personally for their investment. Is this a good area to go to? Then the second time somebody comes along, they don't have to go to that area again. So that's actually the hard money lender I'm talking about does the investigation. Everything's so critical about the fact that if this person's just saw on HGTV Tarek and Christina in old replays, you know, how they made this $250,000 on a $500,000 investment on their 1,000 square foot house, and they went in that 500,000 square foot house, put $100,000 in, and made 750 when they sold it. I mean, all those numbers seem incredible to investors. Well, the hard money lender realizes that this person, by going to the actual property and seeing the neighborhood, realizes this person's being realistic about their actual numbers, or they're not, because everything's going to be based on what they call the ARV. I know they don't use that anymore in the industry, but essentially after repaired value is an acronym that used to be used to indicate what is this house realistically going to sell for. We go back to Jeff's example. They borrowed $250. What did they say? Did they indicate what they're going to be able to sell that house for once it was fixed?
It was in the neighborhood. It was under 4.
Okay.
350. It was somewhere in that range.
So they'll make maybe $100,000 when they get finished on that particular house, and the hard money lender may have an arrangement again that, well, they're not going to get paid their interest until the end of the deal, or they're not. If they do get paid interest, it's interest only during the interim period.
And Thom, I think it is interesting because, well, you've invested some yourself, and I've worked with so many, but we've talked about some big numbers in the TV shows, and they're going to walk away with $100,000. But when these guys are working consistently and not holding, there's times we're closing the deal and something didn't turn out like they thought it was, and they're lucky to walk away with $3,500 because something on the house got deeper than they were expecting. Right? I don't
busted foundations.
Just don't want to give anybody the concept that everybody can go buy a house and flip 6 figures just like that, because that's not the majority of the time.
I would say, yeah, I would really set up the place to say, look, the TV shows are candid. They never show the failures of those groups, and they've never talked about the losses. They've only talked about the gains and the success. It's a hard business, and that's why they call it hard money lending. It costs a lot of dollars. It's to understand it. And I would say a lot of people are staying away from it. Now, there are successful. Huggins Realty does a great job, and they do hard money lending for their realtors. But yes, they're in the 13 to 15% interest rate, sometimes even as high as 18.
Yeah, credit card interest rates.
And so, somebody that understands that, and Luther Huggins is a great resource. He even teaches
to freeze up.
Yeah.
He teaches you to freeze up.
That's how you save money.
That you
freeze it.
You
put
freeze
it in the freezer.
Put it very much in the freezer.
Okay.
But he teaches.
Well, Blair, you asked a real good question that I avoided or didn't answer about what alternatives could they use instead of hard money. Probably one of the best places to go is to a bank that is willing to work with you. Now, I will tell you the Chases and the B of A's and the Wells of the world, they're not going to be working with you no matter what kind of track record you have regarding that type of construction, short-term flipping, that type of deal. What you're looking for is a more regional bank, a Frost or a Prosperity, or somebody that is more in the regional size or local bank that you go to, maybe through your Chamber of Commerce or that type of thing, and that want to develop a long-term lending relationship with you. Now, the rates are still going to be 7, 8, 9%, but the bank is making good money at 8, 9, 10% versus you having to pay 14, 15%. And they give you basically some similar terms, but what they're looking for at that point is they may have you actually exhibit personal liability for the loan versus with the hard money, they're usually not coming with personal liability. They're all that's being held for the security of the property is the property itself with hard money, whereas banks might take and say, well, you've got a $200,000 CD with us. We'll use that as security. We'll tie it to your line of credit of $300,000-400,000. It used to be when you had a $200,000 CD with a bank, they'd give you double or triple that amount as far as lines of credit. They've gotten worse and worse about that, which makes it a little bit tighter for somebody wanting to go out. I mean, if I have to put $500,000 with you to borrow $500,000, I might as well just use my own $500,000 and finance it myself. But banks would be the next solution. That would be a cheaper venue in order to get, but not end up having to spend as much money. I mean, they're going to charge maybe a total of a point versus 3 or 4 points. And some of the hard money lenders will wait for their money till the very end. They'll wait for the interest, charge you no interest during the carried period, and then they want all the points paid at closing as well. And that was the thing Jeff mentioned about was the prepayment penalties. They're not really prepays. They didn't pay them up front. So they're charging them at the end as far as the prepays.
So I agree. The small regional banks, Texas Republic is one of the best.
Ray in the house. Good morning, Ray.
Well, Ray's in the house. That's
Ray's in the house.
I thought it was Thom.
Somebody buy me, sorry, y'all. Give me a minute.
And yeah.
I thought he didn't want me to talk. So we've discovered that what it is, hard money is last resort. Really, short-term flipping is where the target area market. They're looking to get in and get out. I was intrigued that you even used up to 12 months on some of this because I would have thought 6 months would have been the max. But evidently.
Well, I will say, just to clarify that, they'll do 6 months with 6 months extensions is what they'll do.
Okay.
To go more than a year, though, they're not happy to go more than a year.
They'll probably double the interest rate on you.
They would renegotiate it to where it's intolerable, and you would just give them the house. Yeah.
So, but it is a resource available, especially for flippers, especially for folks that want to try to turn a profit in a short time period. 60, 90 days, 6 months at the most is the target. Anything else that we can say about hard money lenders? I mean, they can be individuals, they can be official businesses, they can be investment groups. What else?
Do your research.
Do your research.
We said that earlier, but do your research. Be ready. Know what you're walking into. It's just like we were talking about on our investment show.
Well, I wanted to bring this last point up. Isn't hard money lending also associated with owner financing?
Well, no. I would associate it more.
But the rates aren't usually as high, right, Thom?
Well, that and the fact I associate it more with commercial lending than I do necessarily. I've seen investors take $1 million out of the retirement fund or $2 million out of the retirement fund and do this individually. So I don't disagree, but they oftentimes do this incorrectly. And if they end up doing mortgages of longer term than 1 year, if they do mortgages that are really deemed mortgages, then you're stepping into the zone where we're talking about TDSML's oversight. And TDSML, Texas Department of Savings and Mortgage Lending, may step in and say, hey, you did more than 3 of these this year. You owe us $5,000 and you need to go get a mortgage company to back you, or you need to become a mortgage company.
Okay.
Good question.
So that's again, Jeff just mentioned it. Know what's going on. Do your research on hard money lenders. There are different kinds and there are different types and there are different agreements and there are different ways that they handle it. And some are in there for the money, and some of them you get finished and you go, man, he was just trying to get the property back from this guy after it had been worked on.
Yeah, that's not a good way to conduct business, but
that's not a good way. Here, let somebody else do the work, and I'll take the property because you can't get rid of it, and I've got the money in it, so I just foreclose, and I can wait it out and sell it when I need to sell it.
Well, I think we covered this. I think we've helped our listeners understand what hard money is. It is costly, but you need to know, do your research. And it is a tool to be used. Again, you can still gain value in using this if you use it properly. So,
and for our investor friends out there, I mean, this may be just the only option you have for a first step, but this is an ability to learn and get your learning curve up there. I always tell my investment classes, if you don't screw up 2 out of 10 times, you're not trying hard enough. Well, this could be one of those where Jeff mentioned earlier, they walk away with a $1,500 check, but they turn around and they say, how could I have done this more efficiently? If they're true investors and they want to pursue this type of stuff, sometimes you have to spend a little money to make money later, as they always say. And investment in real estate is the same as any other type of investment. You can lose, and you just might want to minimize your losses, however.
Well, it's an investment in yourself so that you're learning. I mean, if you're going to do this, you need to try to do it at least 4 to 5 times and not just do it once and say, well, this ain't working out, so goodbye. That education, you pay for it either way.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Great way. Well, listen, I want to thank y'all again. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'm Blair Thomas.
I'm Thom Holm.
I'm Jeff Duffy.
God bless.
Welcome Home Radio production provided by Lunatic Digital. Check the listing of this podcast for the links to our sponsors. And don't forget to like, share, and follow us on social media. Visit welcomehomeradio.net for more information. This was a Lunatic Digital production. Visit lunaticdigital.com for all your digital needs.